Rhea had been extremely busy. In a week her first and only son would be 1 year old. It shocked her how much time had flown. It was just like the day before when she was sulking in the bar and wanting some excitement. She surely got the excitement that she wanted, so much so that it was way too much. She had gotten so far away from her original plan that it was like she didn't have any plan at all. It seemed so far away when she found out that she was pregnant. She remembered that she was scared, that she felt she wouldn't be a good mother. She remembered wanting to abort Theo. She would have never been able to forgive herself if she had gone through with it. She was actually thankful to her mom for meddling. She would have not had her son without that. She remembered being forced to get married to Jason, the dry wedding and all. She smiled at the memory. She remembered thinking that she wanted a girl, how she had named Theo Poppy even without going through a scan. She remembered how hormonal she had been, how she cried about everything and overreacted. She remembered loving licorice and reading lots of pregnancy books. She remembered being scared shitless of labor and how she was so far dilated that she couldn't have an epidural. She remembered how shocked she had been when she realized she had a boy. She remembered how disappointed she had been in Jason because he didn't want to hold his child. She remembered being angry with him for leaving her to face most of her pregnancy alone. She remembered how she slowly got used to being a mother, how she began to love her son wholeheartedly. She remembered forcing Jason to put on Theo's diaper and how he had worn it inside out. She remembered it being funny and horrifying at the same time. She remembered Jason also learning to take care of Theo, actually holding him, playing with him. It was a nice memory. She frowned as she remembered that Jason wouldn't be there, that he wouldn't arrive when his son turned 1. She thought of calling him, as she knew that Jason loved his son, but she then rationalized that Jason would know Theo's birthday. He also knew where they lived. If he truly cared and wanted to come to the party, there was absolutely nothing stopping him. "Oh, let's get this," Brianna said, pointing to another style of design. She was already shopping for Thea's birthday alongside her friend, Brianna. Rhea loved that she had the chance to do this, to plan a birthday party for her baby. It was one of the joys of motherhood that she was able to enjoy. It might have been stressful, but she was able to do it at the end, and it is all that mattered. Brianna seemed to love shopping, even more than Rhea did, but Rhea was distracted. She couldn't think of Theo's birthday without remembering Jason, without wishing he was there. She was planning Theo's party all by herself, partly because she hadn't resumed yet and partly because she wanted to keep herself occupied. She didn't want to think about Jason. It truly hurt her that Jason knew she was in Chicago, and he didn't even attempt to see her. The thought was almost enough for her to move on, but that would never only work if she could tell her heart what to do, if she could push her heart to love Richard or any other man. It would have been much more better if the heart could be taught how to love. She would have given her entire heart to Richard, and she would have been happy at the end. But no. She was still pining after Jason, a man that did not really care for her. If he did, he would have come for her. Richard hadn't still stopped loving her and her son, as he still did all the things a father had to do for Theo, and her son was getting more mature. He began to call him Dada more and more. Rhea was a bit scared that her son would know a stranger as his father, but there was not much she could do about it. His real father was an absent one. Rhea picked a pack of PJ Masks balloons from the decorating line in the mall. She barely had enough time to plan the party. She was just grateful she was able to get this much done. She hadn't still ordered a cake and gotten anything ready. She just wanted to buy the decorating supplies first. Brianna had later told her about how she had been attracted to Rhea at first, but they actually turned out to be good friends. It still shocked Rhea how her friend of 4 months was actually gay and she had no idea. made her realize that she wasn't intuitive at all. "Oh, I am so excited, Theo, aren't you?" Brianna cooed to Theo, whom she was holding on her hip. Theo seemed to understand what she was saying and started clapping his hands and showing off his 8 baby teeth in joy. Theo seemed to know that his birthday was coming up soon, and he seemed so happy and jumpy, smiling and waving at everyone, speaking an unintelligible baby language to whoever was willing to listen. It was so adorable to watch. Rhea could not help but stare. She actually birthed the human that was about to turn 1. It was shocking, to be honest. "Who's going to be 1 in 1 week? Theo is." Brianna continued, cooing at her son, and Rhea laughed at their antics. She loved seeing her son so happy. It brought her great joy as a mother. Rhea would have never pictured herself doing this in a lifetime. Falling in love with her child was a glorious experience. "So how are you preparing for your baby's party?" Rory had asked her on the phone. It had been so long since she heard from her friend, and she was so happy for some kind of communication. "Well, everything is actually going well. I have almost everything set for the party tomorrow," she had said to her friend. "What about Will's party?" she asked. "Don't remind me," Rory answered. She was still angry that the 2 boys weren't having their party together, just like they had their baby shower. "Now my baby won't see his best friend on his birthday, and it's your fault," Rory accused, and Rhea just rolled her eyes at her friend. "Forget about that. Let's talk about something else. How is New York now? Is Christmas still in the air?" she asked, knowing fully well that the shop owners wouldn't have stopped playing carols, and that some decorations would still be up. Some bells would still be jingling. "Well, Nate and I have put down our Christmas tree, but Will absolutely loved it. He was fascinated about the shiny lights and the sparkling ornaments. He would sit and look at it forever." Rhea laughed at how like her son and Rory's son were. She smiled as she remembered how much Theo had loved the Christmas tree. Theo loved the Christmas tree too, and if he could, he would actually climb it. But his love ended there. He doesn't love Santa, not one bit. He had screamed his vocal cords out when Santa held him, she said to Rory, and her friend burst out in laughter. The picture was so funny. Theo had been scared shitless of Santa. He held her dress tightly that day and refused to let go. Will was so scared too, but since Nate was there, he was able to let Santa hold him. "We managed to take a picture, though he looked like he was about to run in it," Rory said, and Rhea laughed properly. She tried to think about the part that talked of Nate, so that she didn't get jealous of her friend's husband, and focused on Will being scared. But all in all, Christmas and New Year were good. It was the first year that we spent together as a family. We didn't have the big traditional one we used to have, Rory said, and Rhea couldn't help it. She began wishing that she actually spent her holidays with Jason and Theo, though she knew was blessed to have Richard. "My Christmas was spent with Richard, Theo, and my newfound friend Brianna." "So you have already replaced me?" Rhea asked playfully. "No, not all," she disagreed. "Is this really what you want to do? Live with Richard, start a new life, forget about Jason?" Rory asked seriously and out of the blue. She knew her friend was not supportive of her decision. She knew that her friend didn't like that fact, that she wasn't asking about Jason anymore. Little did she know that it wasn't because she didn't miss him, but it was because she didn't want to seem desperate. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. She truly didn't know what she wanted. Rhea was tired to the bone. The preparation for the party had drained her, and even though she was supposed to be enjoying the party as per mother of the birthday boy, she was still running around and making sure everything was in order. She had always wanted to throw a big party for Theo. She had never really thought it would be so much work. She had to order another cake as the baker had canceled last minute because of personal reasons. She had to think of food and drinks. She had to rent a small hall, as she didn't have space in her house to have the party. Being an apartment and all, she had to think of drinks and clothes. She had invited a whole lot of people and she was regretting the fact. She invited most of her course mates who had kids and some of the parents who also took their kids to the nearby park. She didn't know half their names and the names of their children, but she had invited them all. So she was playing hostess in the hall to close to 50 people and 30 of them were children. She felt like pulling her hair out. To top it all, Theo was unnecessarily cranky. It seemed like he didn't like the environment, or maybe the cake, or the noise was too much. Apart from all the stress, Rhea, with help from Brianna, actually did a good job. The hall was decorated with a PJ Masks design, blue and red material beautifying the brightly lit hall, with character-shaped balloons and toys littered all over. The last-minute character cake looked beautiful with PJ Masks toys around decorating it. Theo was wearing a green gecko suit. Before he started crying, he was walking around, albeit unsteadily in his suit. He seemed fascinated with how it glowed. Rhea had taken a lot of good pictures before he became cranky. Ali in all the party was as nice and friendly as it could be for a 1-year-old. The DJ she hired played PJ Masks' theme song and all other cartoon songs. Richard was very active, and he also helped around the party, although she wished throughout that it was Jason there instead. By the time the party was over, Rhea was tired to the bone. Theo was fast asleep, and without Richard and Brianna, she would have probably collapsed on the ground. She was so happy that she actually hired a cleaning crew. She didn't know what she would have done if she had to clean up all of herself. On the drive back home, Rhea fell asleep in the car, though it was just a few minutes past 5. It was Richard's soft tapping that woke her up from her slumber. She yawned as she walked out of the car as Richard held a sleeping Theo. Someone had come looking for you, a rather dashing-looking young man. Their neighbor, an old gossip-loving woman, said, as they got to their building. At those words, sleep vanished from Rhea's eyes. She knew that there was a low possibility that it was actually Jason, but she couldn't help but hope. At her lit-up face, Richard's expression changed, and Rhea felt bad. After all he had done for her. But the fact was that she would still leave him without any thought if Jason came in. "Thank you very much, Mary," she said to the lady, acting like she wasn't affected to please Richard. He had done a lot for her. "Do you think it is Jason?" he asked her as they entered into the house, after dropping sleeping Theo in his bed, and Rhea just shrugged. "It could be anyone, and besides, Jason doesn't know where I live," she pointed out. "True. But if Jason comes here at this moment, would you leave with him?" he asked her. She had no idea how she would answer the question. She loved Jason and she had been wishing that he would one day come back. But then again, she didn't want to get hurt anymore. She wasn't sure she would be able to take it. "I don't know," she said truthfully. Before she could say any more, their doorbell rang and Rhea's heart suddenly began to beat faster. Jason watched with anger as Richard held his son, his fucking son, in his arms, guiding a sleepy Rhea, and they both looked like a perfect family. His son looked so cute in a little green onesie, and he looked so big. It hit Jason that it had been 4 whole months since he saw him last. It didn't occur to him that his son would have already grown. He got to Chicago a few hours before. He had only been able to get Rhea's address after 1 week, and for the next week he stared at the address, still considering whether or not he would go to Rhea, if he deserved to go to her. After the incident at the office, Tracy had started avoiding him. She would not talk to him at the office, and though Jason was relieved, he was also guilty. After a while, he became guilty enough to actually apologize to her. He told her he was sorry for stringing her along. She had accepted the apology and said she was actually supposed to back out, since he had given her all the signs, but she just didn't want to let go. He had arrived in Chicago with cold and doubts, even when he finally found their house after getting continuously lost. He then rang their doorbell. His heart was beating and he was so scared. He rang and rang the doorbell till their neighbor had come out to say that they had gone for their son's party. It's their child's birthday today and they had a party, the woman had said. She was an old lady who reminded of a cougar, with her raking gaze. "He is my kid," he wanted to say, but he couldn't bring himself to utter the words. After all, he was the one who claimed not to love him. He was the one who said he was not his son. "They are the oddest couple I have ever seen. They live like roommates, and they don't act married at all. I bet they don't have sex." The woman continued, and Jason's eyes has widened at that statement. He had no idea why on earth the woman would know about their sex life in the first place. He simply nodded his head and said he would come back later. He was at the coffee shop that served hot chocolate, since it was so cold, when he sighted Theo and Rhea. He felt refreshed just looking at them. He had quickly paid for his meal and followed them. He stared at them long enough for him to be tagged a stalker. He was studying them, trying to figure out if what the woman said was true or not, whether or not he truly had a chance. He watched them even as the woman talked to them, and watched them till they entered into the house. He took a deep breath and a bold step, and entered into the elevator to the 5th floor, and raised his finger up to ring the doorbell. His heart was beating rapidly in his chest, and he didn't know what would happen. He had no idea what he would do at this point. The door opened up, and it was Richard's angry face that he saw instead of Rhea's beautiful one that he was expecting. Richard recognized his face. He began to close the door back, and Richard just tried to close the door, but Jason put his feet in between the door, hoping that Richard didn't actually lock his feet. "Please, I just want to see Rhea," he said. "Rhea isn't here," Richard said, as Jason expected. "I saw her entering the house," Jason pointed out. "Well, she doesn't want to see you." The game was getting annoying, but Jason didn't let himself get annoyed. After all, he was the one at fault. "Please let her decide that," Jason said as politely as he could muster. "I said she doesn't want to see you, right, Rhea?" he asked, turning back inside. It warmed him to know that it was only a door that separated him from Rhea. "I actually do want to see him," Jason heard Rhea's soft voice say, and he felt like the happiest man in the world. He gave Richard his biggest smile, and the other man didn't have any other choice but to give him some space. Richard's apartment didn't look anything like the place he and Rhea stayed. The place looked small and a bit scattered, with some pictures of Theo playing on the wall, some toys lying on the ground. Give or take, it looked homey. Jason wondered if that was the type of house she liked living in, if she preferred the homey feel of the house to his serenely clean one. He removed his gaze from the house and let his eyes land on Rhea. It had been so long since he had seen her, but she looked so beautiful. Not much had changed in her appearance, other than the fact that she had cut her long brown hair, and it was in short bob. She looked tired, and Jason knew that it was from all the stress of the day. She looked like a typical mom. "Rhea," he said, still staring at her. Her expression was emotionless, and he didn't know what to say anymore. She just stared at him. "Jason," she said, acknowledging him. He wanted to shout and scream. He wanted to hug her so tight that she would never leave. He wanted her to feel his presence. He wanted her to know that he loved her. "I am sorry," he choked out, and a loud cough was heard from behind. He furrowed his brows, annoyed. He had forgotten that Richard was still in the room. "Can we please talk in private?" Jason asked Rhea. He wasn't still sure if she felt about him going to see her. He couldn't even say he was sure that she wouldn't throw a shoe at him, or suddenly become violent. Rhea doesn't have to go anywhere with you, Richard said, butting in again. The dude was getting on his fucking nerves. Don't worry, Richard, Rhea said, standing up and reassuring him, placing her right hand on his shoulder. I will just be around the corner. It annoyed Jason how she seemed so caring to him. She hadn't as much as put a hand on his shoulder since he got there. Let's go, she said to him, picking up a coat and a purse, not before yawning. You don't have to go anywhere, Rhea, you are tired, Richard said, and for once he agreed with the man. He had seen Rhea dozing since she got home. He knew that she must be exhausted. I will be fine, I will just be at the coffee shop, she said again, letting out another tired yawn before rushing out of the house, leaving him to follow behind. It didn't take much time before he got to a steady rhythm with her. As he walked side by side with her, he couldn't form the words that had been on his mind ever since. His mind was completely blank. He had no idea what would anger her. He had no idea what to say. Why is Richard so protective of you? He asked, picking the first thing that was on his mind. The ferocity with which Rhea's head whipped to the side told him that was the worst question he could have asked. Rhea stopped in her steps and glared at him, showing the expression that he had expected when he came in the first place. So that's the first thing that fucking came to your mind? No, I missed you. No, where is our son? No, I haven't seen my wife in 4 months. The only thing you could think of was why Richard is protective of me, she asked, her eyes shining in anger. He didn't know why he loved to see her pissed. All he wanted was to kiss the anger away from her, but he knew that she wouldn't appreciate the gesture. He couldn't help but smile at her words. She had called herself his wife. There was still hope. Why are you smiling? She asked, annoyed at her expression. It was clear she didn't like the fact that she was smiling. You just said you were my wife, he said. Isn't that enough reason to smile? The annoyance on her face changed to slight embarrassment as she turned and continued walking. He didn't waste time following her. She walked for a while and they didn't talk until they got to a Christmas-themed shop. Since it was halfway into January, he figured they were avid Christmas lovers. The shop has a huge Christmas tree in front with jingle bells and red decorating the outside. A big shiny sign that you would never miss was showing Merry Christmas. As Rhea opened the door, jingles started ringing. Inside the shop was full of people, with mugs of hot chocolate and coffee with fumes swirling on top. Rhea immediately sat on a particular table without actually thinking, and by experience, Jason knew that it was the table she sat at every time she came. As they sat down, he took a deep breath and was about to open his mouth when the waitress came and asked to take an order. Jason glared at the waitress and his wrong timing, and the man gave him an apologetic look. Rhea ordered a cup of hot chocolate and Jason ordered a cup of coffee. They were both sipping from their not beverages, blowing steam from the top, when Jason finally decided to say something. I missed you, he said. By the look on Rhea's face, he actually said the right thing this time. If you missed me, then why didn't you come? She asked. Jason stared at her. He didn't know how to answer the question. Why didn't he come? He didn't even know that she was expecting him in the first place, and then again, he had been so stubborn and proud. There was also the issue of his father. He didn't know if he should tell her all that. I don't know, I was foolish perhaps. I didn't think you would want to see me, and my father has been sick, but he is fine now. When he mentioned his father, he could see that she was confused. It was then that he remembered that the last time he saw her, he was still at loggerheads with his father. I thought you didn't like your father, she simply said. I am sorry, I should tell you everything. At that she nodded. Well, my father and I have never been close, but he is the only parent that Cease and I have. Like our mother seems to have flight issues. She had never stayed with us for up to 3 months, since she left when Cease was 5. My father wasn't the best, but he was still there. He has always loved machines, creations, and I have seen these things my entire life. When I was younger I used to like them, but as my father began to force them on me, I began to run away. I didn't want anything that had to with technology. I read business management in school because of that. My father didn't like it, but he wanted to use it to his advantage, and so I became a model, going as far away I could from there. He continued. It wasn't a story he liked to tell, but he wanted to convince Rhea badly. So that was how my hate for my father began. He could do anything for his machines. He could give away anything, including us, his children. He worked on several projects that he believed would change the world. He recalled when he was younger when his father would be working on his projects, and he would forget about him and Cease. They would go without food for days. They would have to beg for food to see what to eat. They both lived alone with their father and with no mother. She was long gone. All of his projects took money, and that was what drove him. He was working on this particular project that needed money that he didn't have to fund. So when the opportunity of the marriage came, my father was ecstatic. He said slowly, this was the part he was truly afraid of. He wanted the money, and when he put his mind to something, nothing could stop him. He had always been emotionally unstable and had threatened me that he would kill himself if I didn't agree to the wedding. I couldn't say he was bluffing, because I was not sure he was. I expected you to call the wedding, and then it wouldn't be my fault, and you refused to. So that is it, he said. He felt so free that it was all off his chest, and Rhea looked so shocked. He knew that he didn't expect it. Did you know that your father was cheating mine? She asked, her voice low, and Jason shook his head. I knew that he had less than honorable intentions, but I wasn't aware that he was actually cheating your father. He said. I don't know what to say. Why didn't you say anything? She asked, her voice now high and sounded frustrated. You didn't want to listen to any excuses. You didn't want to hear what I had to say, and I figured that I didn't deserve you, that you deserved better. I thought that I could live with the knowledge that you were with someone else, but I can't, Rhea. I just can't. He pleaded. He was getting emotional, and the conversation was becoming one that didn't belong in a coffee shop. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, she said in a small voice, and he felt his heart break. He was too late. I want you to try, please. I want to fight for us, for what we have. I love you, he said finally, and her eyes opened comically. Why didn't you say that before? I can't do this, she said, shaking her head and abruptly standing up. Jason didn't waste time and threw some bills on the table and ran after her. I am sorry, he said for the umpteenth time that day when he saw her outside the restaurant. I know it is sudden and you don't have to do anything, at least not yet. You have all the time. I just want to see Theo, Jason said. He needed to see his only son, to hold him in his hands. He had missed the little fucker. Rhea looked like she was about to refuse, but started walking, and Jason followed her. When they got back, Richard was the one who opened the door. He looked surprised and almost angry to see him there. Haven't you guys talked yet? What is he still doing here? He asked angrily, and Jason glared at the bastard. I am here to see my son, he said, putting emphasis on the word my. Your son that calls me daddy, Richard boasted, and Jason had to dig his fingers into his palm so that he didn't throw a punch. He didn't know if Richard was telling the truth or just bluffing, but he wouldn't be surprised. He just wanted to make things right. Would you two just stop it? Rhea shouted, her face red with anger. You, she said, pointing at him. Come with me. She continued and started walking into a room, and Jason followed her like a little sheep. As they got into what looked like the nursery, Jason could hear the door banging loudly. He sighed in relief. Richard was gone. He stared at his sleeping son inside the crib. As he put his hand on his soft cheek, he felt love flood through him. He smiled as he remembered the first time he held him, the first time he changed his diaper, how active he had been when he started crawling. "Happy birthday, baby," he said, bending down to kiss his head. "He is walking now," Rhea said, and he looked at her in wonder. He couldn't believe he was actually walking. "Well, Theo is really a big boy now," he said, chuckling a little, and tears started falling from Rhea's beautiful eyes. "Stop it, Rhea, stop crying," he said, moving closer to her, wrapping his arms around her, cleaning her tears with the pad of his thumb. "It's nothing really, you both just look so beautiful," she said, smiling through the tears. She looked so fucking beautiful that Jason did what he had been longing to do for so long. He pressed his lips to her. Rhea felt Jason's warm lips on top of hers. She had no idea what to feel. The unforeseen contact had brought a whole lot of buried feelings out. The fluttering in her stomach that she thought long dead was awakened by his touch. As his lips glided over hers, her felt like it was on fire and he was the fuel. She had missed their passion so much, him putting his lips atop hers, his hand on her body. As he kissed her, all her anger was long forgotten, and she couldn't help but respond with all she had. It was a soft kiss, nothing like the hot and fast ones they usually had, but it was equally as pleasurable. Something had changed between them, and Rhea couldn't help but think of his claims of loving her. She wondered if it were true. It would be oh so wonderful if it were. She glided her lips over his and opened up her mouth. When he rubbed his tongue over the seam of her lips, she gladly gave herself to him, all the thoughts of her anger flown to the wind. It was only when they heard the loud sound of the door opening that they jumped apart. It was only then that Rhea realized what she had been doing. Theo was still sleeping peacefully in his crib, and Jason was holding her, as if he was not still apologizing for all his wrongs. At the familiar sound of Richard's footsteps, she pushed Jason away from herself. Her husband, ex-husband, gave her a searching look, but she ignored it. She was pretty sure he was about to say something when Richard entered into the room. They were both far away from each other, but she knew Richard would know what they had been doing. She knew by Richard's angry and betrayed expression that he was angry. She knew that she looked thoroughly kissed. She didn't blame him, as she knew that how he felt. She has left him without a thought. Richard angrily walked out of the room, and Rhea ran out following him. She couldn't just let him leave. He had been such a good friend to her. "Richard," she said, running after him, following him till he was in the parlor. For all the years she had known him, he never looked that angry. He has always been unnecessarily serious, but anger wasn't one of his attributes. "Wait, Richard, please just let me talk to you," she begged. She had no idea why she was begging. She just felt so guilty. She felt so bad. "What does he have that I don't?" Richard asked. He wasn't raising his voice, but he sounded deadly. Pain could be heard from his voice. Rhea didn't know how to answer that question. All in all, Richard had treated her better. He had taken more care of her. He even told her he loved her, and she believed him. But she didn't know why after 4 months with him, she couldn't just love him. She couldn't just stay with him. She couldn't just take him as family. The thought of it unnerved her. He has done so much to you. He has hurt you so much. But yet he comes back and he says God knows what, and you jump into his arms. Richard shouted this time. His deadly voice was increasing in intensity. He was squeezing his fist and his expression was tight. He looked like he was badly looking for where to release his anger. She wanted to defend herself against Richard's hurtful words, but he couldn't. She knew very well that they were all true, and so she kept quiet and bent her head. I don't know if it's the bad boy thing, or I don't know. I have tried my best, Rhea. I don't know what to do. Rhea could tell that he was having a whirlwind of emotions. He was angry and then he was sad. It is not your fault, Richard. It is mine. I tried, I swear I did. But I just couldn't. What the heart wants is what it wants, she said, explaining her love for him the only way she could. Richard looked at her, like really looked at her, and then he rushed out of the house, banging the door loudly behind himself. As he left, all Rhea felt like doing was breaking down and crying her eyeballs out. She felt terrible that she had hurt Richard. She walked into Thea's nursery and was surprised to see Jason holding his son. She had even forgotten that Jason was in the house in the first place. Theo was staring at Jason with unfamiliarity in his eyes, though he kept on touching his face with his small hands. Rhea smiled again at how cute they both looked. As Theo sighted her, his signature smile graced his lips, and he opened his teeth, starting to chant her name in baby language, stretching his hands towards her to be held. Theo is such a handsome boy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. She cooed at him and he smiled even wider. Jason looked at her and held her the child, since Theo was already fussing in his arms. He wanted to be held by his mother. He is so big now, Jason noted as she held him. He looked so fascinated about how Theo grew and she just chuckled. Will isn't even this big, he commented again. When last did you see Will? She asked him. She had seen Will's pictures in the morning with his PJ Masks party, and he was as big as Theo was. Jason scratched his head at Rhea's question, and she knew he didn't remember when he saw him last. I don't know, maybe the last time I saw Theo, he admitted sheepishly. You shouldn't do that, or rather you shouldn't have done that, she said out of the blue as she remembered Richard's words. Confusion marred Jason's expression as he asked, "Done what?" "Kissed me. You shouldn't have kissed me. I really don't appreciate it, and I didn't give you permission," she said. Richard's words had cut her deep, and she felt so easy for letting him in. He looked confused and like he thought she was joking, but when she didn't laugh he realized that she wasn't. "Okay," he simply said. "You can come and see your son whenever you want, but I don't think I can trust you anymore," she said, her voice sounding low and somber. Jason looked like he was about to refute her words, but he just kept quiet, keeping his opinions to himself. "I will appreciate it if you left," she said, and Jason left looking all defeated and broken. That night Rhea slept with guilt heavy on her mind. She slept knowing that she had broken two grown men's hearts. Rhea's heart was breaking as she asked Jason to leave. She was bone-tired and confused. She had no idea what to do. Her heart began to beat extremely loudly when he told her he loved her, but she couldn't be sure that he was telling the truth. She did not trust him well enough. She had been extremely surprised when Jason had told her the entire story of his father and everything. She realized that she had judged him so quickly. If she thought of it, he actually didn't do anything wrong. His only crime was loving his father, and his father's crime was finding passion and letting it control him. She loved seeing her family together. She loved seeing Jason hold Theo, and she loved being with him. It would be so easy to say that she had forgiven him, but she was scared. He did it before. She couldn't be sure that he wouldn't do it again. "Hello, Brianna," she said. She badly needed some advice and she wanted someone neutral. Though Rory hadn't liked Jason at first, but she knew that now she would pick him first. "Yes, Rhea," she said from the phone, her voice sounding groggy from sleep. "Can we please meet up and talk?" she asked. She knew that it was still very early in the morning, but she had a very sleepless night and badly needed someone to talk to, someone that would listen to her, someone that would help her out, that would tell her what to do. "This early?" Brianna asked with a loud yawn. Yes, it is urgent, she said, and her friend let out a tired sigh. Okay. Rhea smiled at those words and jumped up from her bed. It was about 5 a.m., but she put on her clothes and dressed Theo up. Staying in the house alone was driving her crazy. Richard hadn't slept in the house, and visuals of both him and Jason dragging her filled her dreams. She quickly picked up and dressed a sleepy Theo before rushing out of the house quickly. Yesterday was the most exciting that I have heard from the both of you. I think I like that young man, their old neighbor said, smiling as she closed the door to her house. Rhea frowned at the weird woman, wondering what she was doing outside so early in the first place, and why exactly she was always observing them. Rhea didn't ask any questions, but quickly walked into the elevator and out of the building. She picked her car keys and immediately drove to Brianna's house. Her friend's place wasn't far from hers, and though it was so early, Brianna answered immediately she knocked. Brianna was wearing a big fluffy robe that swallowed her small stature. She had eye bags under her eyes, and it was then it occurred to her that she wasn't the only one that was tired at the party. Brianna had even stayed longer than she did. Rhea had been so caught up in her own drama that she didn't stop to think that Brianna would be bone-tired. I am so sorry, I didn't think this through, she said a bit desperately. She was tired, but she wasn't sure she could go back to her house just like that. She adjusted Theo on her shoulder. He was still fast asleep, sucking avidly on his finger, and a habit he had gained and refused to leave. Come in, Brianna said, ushering her into her house. She had been there more times than she could count, and she took it as hers. Brianna lived on her own in her own house and not an apartment. It was small and it was very cozy. Her friend had once told her that it was because she valued her solitude. As she entered Brianna's house, she took a seat on one of her plush chairs, lying Theo on her body. Something is off, Brianna said. They hadn't known each other for very long, but Brianna knew well, much more than Rhea knew Brianna. With one look she was able to sense her discomfort. Yes, Rhea agreed and began to tell her everything from the very beginning. So your husband isn't really your husband but your ex? Brianna asked, and Rhea nodded. But now he wants you back. She nodded again in affirmation. He says he loves you. She asked again, and Rhea nodded. And you love him? Brianna asked again, and Rhea nodded. So what is wrong? She asked exasperatedly. They were both seated in her living room, and she had just given her a summary of everything that had happened between her and Jason. Brianna wasn't angry as Rhea expected. She didn't claim to feel betrayed or broken or all of that. She simply gave her advice, and she admired her for that. I am not sure I trust him yet. I am not sure I can trust him anymore, she said truthfully. She had given Jason her all and she would have believed everything that he told her. But the trust that took blind love to build was broken. She still had doubts in his story. She believed him, but yet she didn't. If he lied before, then he could lie again. He had once deceived her, and the second time wouldn't be harder. Then you learn, Brianna said. No one had said those words to her before. She didn't feel she could just forgive him, as it seemed so easy. She still very much loved him and still needed him, but she couldn't trust him so easily anymore. She couldn't give him the all that she used to. I can try, she said, and she remembered when Jason said he didn't know how to be a father. She had told him to try, she had told him to learn, and somehow, some way he actually had. He tried his best to be a good father. If you try and it doesn't work, don't force yourself. Not for Theo and not for anybody. Many parents force themselves into an unhappy marriage because of their children, and then they regret it later, as most of the times the children don't see the sacrifice, and sometimes they don't just appreciate it. Brianna sounded like someone with experience in that field, and Rhea wondered if there was more to her friend that she did not know, that she wasn't aware of. Rory had been telling her to take Jason back and her family Richard. Brianna's words made her realize that she didn't need to choose anyone, that she would be fine on her own. After the serious talk, they both chatted and laughed and joked, and when Rhea was finally driving back home, at about 9 a.m. she was feeling free. Her heart was not bothered. No one was forcing her into any relationship. She wasn't forced into anything. It was her choice to make. Rhea mulled over Brianna's words as she settled into her house. It had been exactly a week since Jason came back into their lives, and he had been nothing short of a pest, and he had been very annoying. He had begun to frequent their house every day with the excuse that he wanted to see Theo. Rhea couldn't deny him the right, and neither could Richard. Jason had made their nosy neighbor his best friend, and she was always vouching for him. Not that she had a say in anything anyway. Richard and her had their much-needed talk, and he finally agreed that they would never have anything together. Richard took it very maturely, not at all like the time they had broken up. He seemed to understand that they weren't meant for each other, but he still didn't like the idea of her being with Jason. And so he would stay in the house every day as Jason would visit, watching him like a hawk. It was as though they were 9 and having a constant pissing contest. Jason didn't just claim to want to see Theo, he actually saw him. He would sit with him and play building blocks with him like he used to when their son was younger. Rhea knew that it broke Jason's heart when Theo would call Richard Dada. But her ex-husband didn't just blow up. He handled it more maturely than he would have 4 months before. It seemed to Rhea that he had grown up, matured even. She knew that something big happened during the period that she wasn't there, but she had no idea what it was. By his actions she could see that Jason wanted her, needed her even. He seemed so desperate for her to forgive him. He didn't bring flowers or chocolates, but she knew him well enough to know that it was not his style. But then again, it wasn't his style to show his emotions, but he was doing just that. He was opening more and more to her than he ever used to. It was getting harder and harder to keep her heart shut. It was getting harder not to push his lips to hers and taste him again. She was beginning to regret why she made him stop kissing her. She should have let him continue. "You look so confused, Rhea," Brianna said, making her jolt her face to the direction of the voice. It seemed that she had once more transited to dreamland. She was in school and it seemed that she couldn't even concentrate in class. She was seeing Jason everywhere. It felt like she was torturing herself. He was there, but she didn't allow herself to talk to him. She couldn't bring herself to forgive him. She just wanted to pretend, as if nothing happened, but a nagging voice was always there, asking what she would do if he did it again. She was not sure she could handle that type of heartbreak. She wasn't sure she could handle heartbreak in general. "I don't know what to do," she said truthfully. "Is this about Jason? Is his presence disturbing you?" Her friend asked, and she immediately shook her head. "It's not that. Even if he wasn't here, I would still be thinking about him. I would still be worried. Him being here is not their problem." "Then what is?" she asked. "I don't know if I should forgive him or not. I don't know if he would hurt me again. I am not sure I can handle so much pain," she said. Her voice was already slightly shaking. "You are in a relationship, Rhea. You are bound to get hurt. You are bound to get broken. I can't assure you that Jason would never hurt you, and neither can he. It is inevitable. The major thing is, do you trust him? Do you trust that he will not willingly take your heart and smash it on the ground? Do you trust that he would do anything in his power to avoid hurting you, to avoid bringing your pain? Can you give yourself to him?" Brianna asked, and Rhea took a long and deep breath. She wasn't sure how she would answer that question. Did she trust that he wouldn't hurt her? She wasn't sure. He seemed different these days. She couldn't point her finger at it, but she was sure that something had changed within Jason. "I think I trust him. I think I trust the change in him," she said. "I think you both need to talk, and you need to hear him out. You need to consider his claims." Rhea smiled at Brianna's words. She was oh so wise. "You give the best relationship advice you know. I wonder why you are not yet hitched," she said jokingly, and a free look fell from Brianna's face. Rhea knew that she had hit a nerve. Brianna was very closed off and Rhea basically didn't know anything about her, but she knew that she had a troublesome past. "I don't want to talk about it," Brianna said in a hard voice, and Rhea just sighed. She didn't think she would get anything out of the girl. Rhea took Brianna's advice to heart, and when Jason came again that evening, she proposed that they take a walk. At her words, Richard looked angry and Rhea said nothing. She was tired of pleasing people, and she just wanted to do something for herself. Jason seemed very happy and excited at the prospect of walking with her, so much so that she had to remind him that it was not a date. The weather was cold and small flickers of snow were falling from the pitch-black sky. It looked much later than it actually was, as they walked on the icy road, her nose getting cold from all the cold. Rhea started to regret proposing a walk in the first place. "Where do you stay?" she asked him as they walked a few blocks past their own building. She couldn't bear the cold anymore. It then occurred to her that she never asked where he was staying for the 1 week he had been coming to see Theo. "I stay in a motel a few blocks in front," he said, pointing at some dingy place. She knew very much that Jason loved class and he loved comfort. If not that he was the one that told her, she would have never guessed that Jason would live in such a building. "Are you sure you live there?" she asked him. He looked amused by her question. He didn't even tease her, just nodded his head and smiled. "What happened to you?" she asked. "What do you mean?" he asked, truly looking confused. "Do I look different? Tell me I am not less sexy," he said dramatically, and she burst out in laughter. She finally found his joking self. "You look fine. Maybe you lost a little weight, but all in all you look pretty good," she said with a hint of laughter, but she was serious. Jason still looked as panty-dropping worthy as she had since the day she first saw him at the club. "And I mean, what happened in those 4 months? Tell me about that. I want to know," she said. They had gotten to the front of the homey-looking motel. The place reminded her of Rory's and Natie's hotel, but less classy. Jason walked in after greeting a friendly lady. Rhea hated the feeling of jealousy that came to her as Jason smiled at the woman. She had no idea what it came from, but she hated it. It meant that she cared for him, that she cared enough to be jealous if another person had him. Jason opened the door to his room, and Rhea stepped inside, taking off her coat and gloves, since it was hot inside the room. The both of them sat on his bed and sipped hot chocolate and started talking like old friends. Usually the air between them would be tense, and they wouldn't be able to talk of anything. But that day the situation reversed. Jason had cracked a joke, and she laughed. It was as though they were back to the times where nothing was between them, when they would watch movies loudly, and when he would kiss her belly. Except this time, she wasn't pregnant, their child was 1, and they weren't married anymore. "Can you believe that we thought Theo was a girl?" Rhea asked, laughing, remembering how she had bought so much girl clothing, painted the nursery pink, and had even named Theo Poppy. Yeah, you believed it so much that I began to believe too. No one could tell you that you weren't having a girl. To think that we were so sure and we didn't even have a scan," he said, laughing again. "Remember the first time that you wore Theo a diaper like you wore Inside Out? Who does that?" She laughed again. She felt so free that she forgot the reason why she said she wanted to walk with him in the first place. They talked and laughed so much that one would think their hot chocolate was mixed with alcohol. They laughed like they were high, they laughed till they slept of. It was the incessant ringing of a phone that brought Rhea out of the land of sleep. She was still in her shirt and trousers from the night before. Jason's hand splayed over her stomach, and he was sleeping soundly. As she looked around, a feeling of déjà vu came to her. It reminded her of the one-night stand, but no sex was involved. Rhea carefully removed Jason's hand from her body and picked up her thick jacket from where she had thrown it on the chair. She searched through the pockets, and it was then she realized that she didn't take her phone with her. Guilt and pure shame washed over her as it hit her that she had left her son alone with Richard to go for a simple walk, but ended up staying for the entire night. She felt like a terrible mother. With unshed tears in her eyes, she picked up her jacket and gloves and began to leave. "Where are you going?" Jason asked, his voice making her freeze her steps. "What does it look like?" "I am going home," she said, and he immediately stood up from the bed, as though he wasn't sleeping just moments ago. "Let me come with you." He was already on the move as he said those words, throwing on a jacket, and so she had no choice but to wait for him. "I am so sorry for keeping you so late," he said for the umpteenth time. "I said it is fine. You didn't know what would happen. We were both carried away, so stop apologizing," she said. She was already getting oh so annoyed of his constant apologies. He had been apologizing to her since they left his house, and they were already round her block. "It's not just that. I am sorry for everything, sorry for all that I have done. I have been a shitty father and a shitty husband, and I apologize for that. I want to make up for it all, and I want you to trust me again. I love you even though I am not sure what love is. I want to learn to love you. I just need you to teach me. I am willing." Rhea could hear Jason's shaky voice as he bared his soul to her, as he opened his heart, and it was the very first time he had been so raw to her. Her eyes wet with unshed tears, and more than ever she wanted to know what had happened between those 4 months. As he said those words in front of her apartment, she didn't doubt him. She wasn't scared that he would hurt her. She believed him with all her heart. She trusted him. She forgave him. "I don't know how, but I wish you would just let me try," he said, and she nodded her head. "It's all right, Jason, I forgive you." The pure look of joy that appeared on his face made her heart jump. She felt like the most important person in the world to be able to put such a smile on his face. He opened his arms as if to hug her, but he seemed skeptical. He was probably remembering how she reacted the last time. She nodded to him, and he immediately pushed her into hug. Pushing his warm body atop hers, she snuggled deep into him, enjoying his scent. It had been so long. She stood there hugging him for longer than she could account for. There was nothing sexual about the hug, but it seemed to mean so much more. "You know I love you, right?" he asked her as she scrunched up her nose at him. "Too soon?" he asked again, and she shrugged. She had actually never told him that she loved him, even though she loved him for so long. Her love for him grew and grew with each and every obstacle they faced. "We should go slow, like a normal couple. That will be cute, right?" she asked, and Jason looked confused. He probably felt since he told her that he loved her they will get married and live happily ever after. She would have actually done that if Richard hadn't said that thing about going too fast. "But we are married," he said. "We are divorced," she reminded him, and his expression immediately went sour. She knew then that he was still regretting signing the divorce papers. "We should go see Theo," she said, changing the subject, a smile still on her face. She was still feeling all giddy from Jason's little speech earlier on. Jason held her hand in his as they went up to their own door, and he might as well have fucked her for all to see, because that was how it felt. Her cheeks felt warm, and she felt like a teenager again. Her neighbor was outside her door by the time they got to their house, and as she sighted their entwined palms, her eyes lit up and a smile appeared on her face. Rhea rolled her eyes at the drama-loving woman and knocked on the door to the house she had been staying in for the past 4 months. A few moments after she knocked, Richard opened the door.